Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So this is day two's prompt for October Magic, and the prompt for today is a color palette. And so I'm not feeling any better than I did yesterday, so this is great. I love swatching colors onto paper when I'm feeling a little bit unmotivated or down or just generally not up to documenting in my journals. Sometimes when I feel stuck creatively and just don't know what to do, I revisit the art supplies that I have. A lot of the times I end up buying a lot of new art supplies, but I also revisit the ones that I have and I do some swatches. So I have this little swatch book that you see here. I made it. It's just a little A6 swatch book, and I was trying to figure out what colors were in those two little bottles. I believe I put paint in those two little bottles for when I went to Boston. I took them on my Boston trip, and I swore they were both Jane Davenport colors, but turns out only one of them is a Jane Davenport color, and I think the other one is just the golden Payne's gray, which I end up swatching twice, and you'll see further down in the video where I realize, oh, they're basically the same colors. But yeah, so I am just swatching colors here, and these are just paint colors that I pulled out from my collection of paints that I thought would match really well with my journal. And so my journal has a distinctive color palette, right? I created it that way so it had that color palette. And I am just pulling out colors that I think match that color scheme. So a lot of these colors were the paints that I used yesterday on my spread, and a lot of them are gouache. They're the Turner gouache, and I will leave links down below to like all the paint colors if you're interested in seeing what I'm using. But yeah, so I pulled out the same colors that I used yesterday because they match so well, and I'm like, yeah, those are part of my color palette. And then I pulled out a few more that I thought would match really well. And so the paints here are a mixture of the Turner gouache, the Holbein gouache, and golden acrylics. Generally, that's what I tend to buy. I prefer the little gouache. Like, I'm not really picky about my paints, really, as long as they go on really creamy and I love the color, like that's it for me, right? I'm not making art to sell or anything like that, so I don't really need to think about the light fastness or things like that. Like, I really don't. So I just kind of pick out colors when I'm at the art store that I like. And I really love the Holbein gouache. I like how they come in tiny little bottles, and I love the colors that I've picked from them. They're just really expensive, those little tubes of gouache. I recently discovered Turner gouache, which I believe is another Japanese brand, and Jerry's Art Supply has them for really cheap. Like, they're about the same, like, I think the same size as the Holbein little ones, but you can get them for like $3.99, which I think is the cheapest that I've ever found, a little tube of gouache. And some of the colors are very comparable to the Holbein. I only have a few. I try to buy ones that I didn't have colors for in like the Holbein, but like that marine, it's pastel marine blue color that I used on one of these swatches is I think the only blue color on the swatch. That color is almost the same as the pale lavender in the Holbein. It's very similar, but you see here, so I just basically swatched colors out onto some scrap watercolor paper that I have. I always keep these little strips when I make like journals and stuff like that. I always have those little bands left, and I keep them specifically for swatching out colors. And so I just ended up cutting them all up like into like wonky squares, and then I'm taking my shears here that have like this little scallop edge, and I am just creating these little scallop swatches, I guess you can call them. And you'll see here that I just kind of cut them all, getting as most of that paint on the page as possible. And then I realized it probably would look better if they were all the same size. And so since my smaller ones are the ones that are like, what, like 3 by 1, 2, 3, like 5 scallops, 3 by 5 scallops, I ended up going back and trimming them all down. But I'm basically going to use this page that I have here that has sheet music. I'm going to use that as my little palette. I think the colors pop better off of a neutral page than it does off of the pattern paper page. And that pattern paper is just the backside of the Planner Society paper that I used. And it's just this pale pink with these blue and white butterflies. And so you'll see that I do end up covering most of that pattern paper because I really wanted the focus to be on the colors. So I trimmed down my little scallop squares here, and I'm just kind of like positioning them in a way that the colors kind of balance off of each other and so that the palette looks really nice. And I end up switching out some of the colors in this. So like some of the pinks, like I don't even know how many shades of pink here. I have a lot of shades of pink on this particular palette, and I just end up swapping them out, or swapping one out for that white lace. It's my favorite lace from Michaels. And then a piece of this like velvet fabric. I use these pieces on my cover, and I thought it would be really, really cool to have some of those pieces in my palette, like as part of the palette. I did this before with one of my December dailies where I created a color palette and I actually used fabric as some of the swatches, and I really liked how that looked. So I am repeating that here, and I am using that lace and then that little bit of the velvet. And the velvet, I just replaced the purple that I had, because the velvet was kind of like this really soft purple. So I just kind of replaced it. But I ended up using those other two colors that I swatched. I ended up using them on the other side, and I just kind of cut them in half and like added some more color swatching there. But right now I'm just kind of putting them on the page, and I did a very poor job here at lining them up so that they looked even. That whole left column of swatches are just not even at all, and I don't know why I didn't notice that. I notice it now as I'm watching the video back, but I didn't notice it as I was creating, as it happens, right? But yeah, I'm just using double-sided tape to put down the watercolor paper. For the fabric, I'm using Fabrifix. It's just a fabric adhesive to glue those down onto the page. And that's basically my palette. That's my color palette there. I really love it. These colors. I've kind of used this palette before. I know I was heavily inspired by my Boston travel journal when I created this journal. That was a journal that I kept in November of last year when I went to Boston. And I love the colors in that, and I was very inspired by those colors to create this. But this journal has gone a little bit more purple, it's gone a little bit more dark in terms of like, it's very mystical and witchy and stuff like that. Whereas the Boston one wasn't, it had a little bit more warmer colors to it. But this one is very cool and very purple and very witchy and magic and mystical, which was my whole intention for it, right? And so the colors that I picked were very similar, but more on that cool, darkish side. Lots of purples, definitely. Purple, I love purple. Purple is one of my favorite colors, and it's a shame that you don't really see, it's not a color that you see in fashion, it's not a color that you see in the scrapbooking worlds or the journaling world or just products in general. Most companies just don't use purple. And maybe I'm thinking it's because it's like a tricky color to use for some bizarre reason. I don't know. Certain shades of purple can be very hard to match up with things, but just so you know that certain shades of purple just doesn't go really well with certain shades of green. Like that is a given. But I love purple. I love the richness of a deep purple. I love the beauty of a pastel purple. Match it up with a mint and you're golden, or like a navy blue or the pink. It's just, those are colors that I think go really well with purple. Not so much the complementary colors. I think using orange and using like a brighter green and using a yellow just makes the whole thing just look really bad. Like, don't do it. And I think that's why I really love Kathy, her stickers, Lace and Whimsy stickers, so much. She tends to use a lot of like lilac and like pastel, like lavender, and those lighter shades of purple with, again, with the pinks and like the pale blues and, kind of pastel-y colors. I think purple in a pastel is gorgeous. And I just love purple. I don't understand why there are not more purple products out there, but I don't know. So here I am trying to figure out if I can use any one of those little scrappy bits to write the date. And I was like trying to use this one. This was a green that didn't make the cut. It was a little too, I guess, bright and not as like moody as the rest of them. And I just I trimmed it down, I cut it apart, and it just didn't work. So what I ended up doing is just writing my date, stamping my date actually, just onto the page like that, and journaling around it. I tend to do this in my little journals a lot, and so yeah. This page, honestly, I didn't really need to journal about the palette, so I really didn't. Last night, I ended up watching Blondie, the new Marilyn Monroe sort of biopic fictional thing on Netflix, and it's been on my, like, I had some weird dreams last night because it's been so heavily on my conscience. That movie was a trip. Like, the way that they presented it, it was like they presented it in sort of like a schizophrenic kind of way, and I'm wondering if that was a comment about like her mother's condition. I don't understand, but it's that. And just I know it's like fiction, I know it's based off a book, but like I don't know a lot about Marilyn Monroe's life, but I know it was a hard one. And I don't know, I kind of didn't really like the movie. And I felt really bad for Marilyn Monroe. Like, I know reading up on her, like reading her bio and like reading her story, that made me feel bad, but like watching that made me even feel even worse. And so I was just writing here a little bit about it. Like, the whole point, like, for me, all that she wanted in her life was, you know, to be loved. And I find that to be a reoccurring theme in a lot of like tragic artists' stories. I watched Elvis like a couple of weeks ago, the Baz Luhrmann movie. Fantastic film. Again, that whole idea of they just want to be loved. Like, I'm pretty sure Michael Jackson just wanted to be loved. And so I just kind of wrote about that here because I started off saying that one thing I know in life that is for sure besides death is the fact that everyone just wants to be loved. And like it was just a thought that was in my head all day today, and so I kind of went with it. And that is what I ended up journaling about here. Yeah. The movie's interesting if you want to watch it. Go ahead, but I don't know. Something about it didn't sit well with me, and I just felt really, really bad for this woman that I didn't even know, but who made such an impact in like our culture and stuff like that. I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts about it. I might journal some more outside of this journal about it, but yeah, that is my spread here. I really hope you enjoyed watching me create my color palette, and I hope you're enjoying the challenge, and hopefully I can see you tomorrow with another video. It is Monday, so we'll see how that goes. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye!